Well, welcome everybody to the seventh episode of the Merck at Work podcast. Kobe, I'm excited today to have Becky Wolf join us. Becky is pretty popular out on LinkedIn, so a lot of people probably already know her. But she is the times I've spoken with her, and I know you've watched some of her content. She's
Yeah.
a real pro, so I'm excited to have her join us today.
Yeah, I'm pumped up too, Kyle.
Hey,
Welcome,
thanks so
Becky.
much, guys. I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. No, I'm been looking forward to this. Enjoyed our conversations we've had, and I know Kobe again mentioned that he watched one of your other shows with, I think it was Ansel, and enjoyed it. So we're excited to have you.
Everybody knows Ansel too.
Yeah, we're on a good stretch of getting a whole bunch of really popular people on here. So yeah, why don't we just get started with give us some of your background, your personal and career path that brought you to what you're doing today.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. And again, thanks for the opportunity. So yeah, my name is Becky Wolf. I started in medicine, gosh, I don't want to say how many years ago at this point, but I started in medicine a long time ago. I worked as a PA for about 13 years, a little over 13 years. Majority of my time as a PA, I worked in cardiology. I became a health coach because I saw the injustice of just treating people with chronic disease, putting them on medication after medication, and patients coming and asking me, how do I get off medications? How do I get healthy? And how do I lose weight? Those are the three common questions I would hear over and over again. And as much as I would send them to dietitians and try to help them in any way that I could with education, it wasn't effective, and got really frustrated, was in my practice administrator's office probably every week of like, we are not helping people. And but through my own frustration, became a health coach and designed a program for my practice to talk about behavior modification, habits. I started learning about motivational interviewing and then got certified, and found just complete joy and excitement with helping people get off medications. I tell this story all the time, but one of my patients that was in that part of the group, he changed my life. I remember having a conversation with him. He was seeing his regular cardiologist, and the doc comes and gets me. And he's like, "Hey, go back to room 4. You know, Mr. Jones wants to see you." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm an hour behind. I haven't eaten lunch. I'm grumpy. I'm like not in a good mood to like see anybody else at this point." So I go back and I sit down and I, see my patient, and he's like, "I want you to know what you're doing matters." And I'm like, "I see patients every day." I completely blew by like what he was trying to tell me. And he's like, "I want you to know what you're doing matters." And I was like, "Okay." And he's like, "Becky, I've lost 35 pounds. I'm off all my medicines except for one, and you're the only person that listened to me." And that changed me. It fundamentally changed what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And I knew I wanted to be a coach, but a couple years later, figured out like executive coaching or leadership coaching would be my thing. But that was the first impetus for me, like really making a change in the direction of I would go in healthcare.
That's really neat. No,
Mhm.
that's a neat path to hear about in the story. So, what
Yeah.
we know you're doing some of that leadership coaching in healthcare. Dive into
Mhm.
that a little bit. I know you even do it outside of healthcare.
Yeah, I do it in multiple different industries at this point, but so got started in doing executive coaching. I partner with a larger entity called Giant, so we're a global organization. So we help companies all over the world, companies like Chick-fil-A, Delta, Pfizer. So we partner with them and implant culture into organizations. So healthcare, we have our own language that we speak.
Mhm.
And what can be missing in leadership is there's no continuity of language. So we help give organizations culture. So we want them to be innovative. We want leaders to be responsive, not resistant. We want people to be able to turn on the dime, and people need to be agile in order to do that. So with the company, we actually, again, we just partner with organizations and help them just implant a continuous leadership language. So it's really effective. People understand how to use it. We're building stronger leaders through communication and stronger relationships. That way they can align deeper with the company.
Yeah, that's neat. And with your healthcare background, I'm sure, like you said, you kind of speak. Everybody speaks that language, so I'm sure it
Yeah.
resonates with the folks. You know how to speak to those people
Yeah.
effectively.
Yeah. Yeah, healthcare is still my heart. I love healthcare. I will never stop loving healthcare because I just feel like it's the most vulnerable time you are in your life when you're seeing a clinician or like when you're, from my perspective anyway, it's the time in your life where you need somebody the most to show up for you. And when you have somebody you trust on the other side of that conversation, it can change how you take your medication. It can change how you treat yourself or how you, the habits that you have, all of those kinds of things. So I think it's fundamentally one of the most important relationships that we have is with our providers. So,
No, that's so true. You mentioned it, but you are vulnerable in their care and their situation. Like you put so much trust into healthcare professionals and leaders, and so
yeah,
it does make a difference when they're effective in their communication and they
yes,
can help guide your processes and in your life in a lot of ways.
yeah, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, that's great. No, we enjoy being in healthcare as well.
Yeah.
Every industry has its ups and downs, but when people have a overall an altruistic mentality and they're trying to help other people, it's a good place to be.
Yeah, I think as entrepreneurs we get that too, right? So we love what we do generally, and that's why we're doing what we do.
Yeah,
And we just want to serve. Like I think that's the best part of entrepreneurship of like, hey, can I help you? If not, I probably know somebody that can.
yeah,
So, so that's what's fun about it.
that's so true. And it brings me back to what you said about being serving. That's been something that's been the kind of the epicenter of some of our values is just being so service oriented. And
Yeah,
I think I've mentioned this before, but on other podcasts, but I've heard somebody say in order to really sell effectively, you have to love people.
yeah,
And I think that's the same way in entrepreneurship and sales and, just
yep,
growing a company and relationships. You have to love the people and care about them
yep,
and want them to be successful. So
yes. And you have to
that's what
care
makes
about them as much to like get yourself out of the way. That's what I recognized of like, if I'm not the solution, who is? And how can
yeah,
I help them that way? So yeah,
yeah, for
that's
sure.
good.
Um, well, what just a question for you here. In your time of doing this, what has been your view of what makes the most effective, leaders in whether
Mm,
it's healthcare or whatever industry that you've
yep.
been in? I know you've done some stuff with the military even, so
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
curious to what your viewpoint of a very effective leader looks like.
Yep. So the most important thing a leader can do is fight for their own health. So it is not just physical health, it is fighting to understand their stresses, what makes them like strong. So understand their strengths, understand their stresses, and then it is a tipping point. So when they understand how they can walk into a space, give their best, and when they recognize like they're not at their best, they can calibrate quicker to get back to baseline. So health is the number one thing I have them get a really good picture of. And there's a number of ways that I do that, number of tools that I use and helping them understand how their brains work. But that is the absolute number one thing. And then beyond that is really self-awareness. Like how are you the most effective at what you do? And then who's on your team that can fill in not the gaps, but who can kind of offer an alternative perspective beyond that?
Mhm.
Because the way your brain works, like Kyle and Kobe, your brains probably work a little bit differently. And even if you're, map out the same as far as personality, it's likely you've had different experiences. They're going to offset
Yeah.
some different things. And that's what I've recognized. Some of my best friends were wired exactly the same, but we are very different people. so, so it's super fun when you get to just recognize the strengths that you have and you can offer, and it just makes work so much more fun.
Yeah, no, that's neat. Um, how do those types of leaders that gain that kind of self-awareness and that health that you talk about, how do they get their employees and people under them to kind of catch a similar vision or see what they're trying to do and accomplish and articulate that to them?
Yeah. Yep. So communication really important. So the more the leader knows, so the more self-aware they are to how they communicate, how they build trust, um, all of those factors are incredibly important. But leaders, it is so hard now because our job is to really inspire, to motivate, to really engage employees. Gallup study from 2024, there's 31% of our population that's engaged right now in the workforce.
Wow.
31%. That is a startling number. That is
Wow.
crazy. So you have to find a way to motivate your people. And it's by modeling great behavior. It is by understanding yourself and your stress. It is by really understanding your employees too. It's like
Yeah.
really understanding who they are, how they tick, what motivates them internally, and like really like being there for them and like tightening that lever that we're like, okay, I can help them. And I know them now in order to do that. So this is why I think the shared language is such an important thing with what we use at Giant, because it really is developing the leader. It's transforming them versus like training them on conflict or something. It really is, hey, I want you to know so deeply how you're wired that you have internal motivation to do what you do.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Kobe and I were actually joking the other day about how the working with people like you about finding out about somebody's personality and what makes them
Yeah.
motivated. We were kind of picking back and forth at each other, joking like, well, maybe if, we did something with Becky, she'd find out that, Kobe, you're motivated by getting belittled and told that you're no good. And so we had some laughs about that, but
Yeah.
so
Yeah, it's
no, that's
it's
great.
funny. I have two sons, and they're very different on how I have to lead them. So my oldest, he needs tons of celebration, and he's an awesome kid, so cool, just
Mhm.
like loves people, will talk to anybody. My
Yeah.
youngest, very much like what you just said, Kyle, he hates fluff. He's like, "Don't give me fluff. Tell me straight and what you need me to do."
Yeah.
So like, okay, that's harder for me because I'm your mom and I just want to love you. And he's like, no, I'm not here for that. Just tell me
Yeah.
what I need to improve. So
That's great. No, I look back at my college years of being a collegiate athlete and playing golf, and my freshman year, our golf coach, he would come up to ask me how I was playing, and I'd say, "Well, it's
yeah,
not going very well," and I'd tell him, and he would just give me this like down look, like you're terrible. He's like, "Good players don't do this," like, and it would motivate me because I hated
yeah,
like thinking that I was disappointing everybody and letting everybody down, and that I was like, you know, just not trying hard enough, and like it
yeah,
would get me going. So
yeah, yeah.
it is.
Kobe, for you, what is it for you? What do you notice as far as what motivates you as far as,
And I would probably say it's probably the same as Kyle. If someone really, gets in my ear and gets onto me, I'm usually quick to act and quick
yeah,
to respond.
yeah, that's good. Yeah, it's just helpful to know how we take critique, right?
Yeah.
I have a number of leaders that will say, like, don't give me fluff, just tell me straight. I just need to know. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, it's funny because I would have to say that, just in general, the way that I'd like to be, approached is the encouragement and everything like that, but I'm not sure that is as effective as somebody getting up in your ear.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think it depends for me too. I think if I look back at sports too, Kyle, very similarly to you, if somebody was just like, "Hey, do this, change this, and you're going to get better," I'm like, "Okay, motivate me because I like to win."
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
get the competitiveness going if you're a competitor, and I'm sure you're familiar with like Strengths Finder.
yes,
And
yep,
one of mine comes back is one of my top strengths was competitiveness. So that's
yeah,
always gets me riled up.
I love it.
um, let's see here. What going on the whole leadership topic? Obviously, there's benefits to it, and being a business person, things are measured in ROI. So,
Mhm.
do you have studies or things that you've seen where you go into a place or others in your industry, what kind of effect that it has, company wide, that they
Yeah,
see, actual monetary benefit to changing leadership roles or adjusting the way people speak to each other or getting people oriented the right direction. What's kind of
yeah.
the value of that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So we know, so Harvard Business Review publishes articles all the time on leadership, why it's important, return on investment, all of those kinds of things. And we know that leaders who are self-aware and emotionally intelligent, those companies, the more leaders they have like that, there's a 21% increase in profit margin. So we know hands down those studies are effective. So then I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, let's test this because I need to make sure for myself that I'm seeing like some benefit for companies. The average company teams, so we're looking at the whole organization with the research we've done, they're about 59% effective. So productive, effective. That's very low. So
Yeah.
think about notching that up 5 to 10% and like what that could do to the bottom line, right?
Yeah.
So if we have just like that much more improvement. So when I go into organizations, we have a team performance assessment that we use. So we're clinically, I always say clinically because I'm in healthcare sometimes, but we're documenting what that looks like. So if I have a team or a site that I'm working with, I'll want them to take the assessment and I'll have them take it as an organization because I want to know where we're at. Are we actually making, functional improvement from that? So that's one measure that we have. And then we can usually calibrate that to bottom line. I'm also looking at their KPIs that they have. So what are the
Mhm.
indicators that they're really working towards? So not only am I responsible in helping them grow as self-aware leaders and emotionally intelligent leaders, I'm also working with them towards what are the skills they need to learn for their job to just notch them up a little bit more? And how can I help them bridge that gap? So all of that is what we're working towards. So again, my goal is to really notch them up. So in organizations, I just got off a call with somebody talking through like the reasons. I'll have like calls with them. Either
Mhm.
they're looking to grow, they're under expansion mode for the next like 1, 2, 3 years, and they need a
Yeah.
pipeline of leaders, and they're recognizing they need to develop people within the organization. Or like people have left and they have nobody. They're green leaders and they need to develop them. Um, or like they're just trying to solve for like burnout and turnover, and they're just like, we can't stabilize and we're missing something. So we've got to develop people to get everything stable and a foundation. So you can track the turnover rates and you can track
Yeah.
monetarily what that looks like, right? So
Mhm.
1/2 to 2 times the person's salary is just general cost of turnover. And that's usually, depending upon the organization, that can be hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars.
Yeah.
So it really depends, but we can start to track those costs. So ROI can be really, really a big deal when you're developing people.
Yeah, no, that's interesting because it's, that when there's consultative type services and that deal with more of, the feelings or your
Mhm.
leadership or, the how your brain
Yeah,
works, sometimes people are like, well, what does that do to my finances? But it really does.
yeah,
And that's
yeah,
interesting. And, you bring up those studies and I didn't know that kind of stuff was being studied. I probably should have, but it is interesting. And that was just something I was curious about because
yeah.
we find it very effective to learn about one another. Like
Mhm.
I've said, we've done things like strengths finders and things like that. And you start to realize who somebody is and it is beneficial, but then to turn that into actual, you know,
Mhm.
monetary value is another thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It is quite different. And I would say like the key thing is to measure leadership. Like how do you want it measured? And are you tracking it? Does it make sense after 6 months to track the same thing? Because maybe you've hit like another area of growth in the company. So
Mhm.
companies that we've followed for quite a while will often have to change the KPIs because it's like, oh, okay, we've already hit this. This is kind of old news. We need to go to something different now. So we need to actually go and track something different. So it's really an in-depth discussion of like what matters most right now, and then how are
Mhm.
we tracking it, measuring it, and seeing if it's effective.
Yeah, no, it's interesting.
Mhm.
I like learning about all this kind of stuff. I've just learning about some. There's been things that I've gotten into on golf psychology and
Yep.
leadership stuff, and it just always fascinates me to hear about how to
Yeah.
better work together and how our brains work and operate. So
Yeah.
and putting that into money is always good for business
Yeah.
owners. So
It is. Yep. Yep. Leaders are more decisive. They're more willing to innovate. There's a bunch of different reasons why it's important because you want people to have healthy, clear decision making function. in order for them to optimize your company. So the more you can get them there, the better it is for your business.
Yeah, for sure. What you talked a little bit about Giant. What's I obviously don't want you guys to give away any of your secrets or any of your proprietary stuff, but what's kind of some of your methods and ways that you guys identify? I know you talked about it a little bit with some of like the learning process that you do, but what's
Yeah.
the way that you start to identify people's traits or leadership
Yep.
capabilities? How does that process
Yeah.
work and look like?
Yeah. So there's a million, personality assessments you can do, right? So um, the most common ones I hear, so StrengthsFinder, DISC, Myers-Briggs, and then we have
Mhm.
something called Five Voices. So the reason our company developed that, there are some limitations on some of the other ones, and I am a bit biased because I love what I do. So keep that in mind. But
Yeah.
but um, I think so. If we had to kind of calibrate the different types of personality assessments, DISC is kind of high level. I think StrengthsFinder high level. So really great, just
Mhm.
like team building kind of orientation of like who's on the team, what can I count on them for.
Yeah.
DISC, same thing. So kind of high level DISC StrengthsFinder is kind of all in that bucket, and then Five Voices is kind of in the middle, and
Mhm.
then Myers-Briggs goes pretty deep. So there can be a lot of information. I love that personally, but not everybody wants that information. Or it's not like you can do like a 5-hour presentation on it to most people because they don't have time. I would do it, but they don't have time. So I'm limited. So Five Voices is kind of in the middle, and it really gives you a lot of insight into um, your order. So it is from like one to the next. So I'll give you an example. I'm a creative connector, pioneer, nurture, guardian. So all five of those voices. I'm better at people for the future. So I see impact for the future. I get people around certain things. I love innovating. I love thinking outside the box. Like I think of things perfectly for the future of how they could be. Guardians are my opposite. They're not going to think like that. They're going to say like process oriented. So I tell people, the reason we do these kinds of things in groups, we want everybody to know where they fit and how to contribute at their best. So if I'm working with like a team of 12 people and we have a mix of different, personalities, I'll say, who would you go for process improvement? And they're gonna be like, the Guardians. So it just is a really simple, easy way to get for people to gain context about one another. It's fun, it's fluid. People remember it. I'll do the first workshop. I'll come back the next time. I'll be like, okay, who's a nurturer? They'll raise their hands. It's just fun and it's
Yeah.
lightweight, but it's an easy way to remember it. And the whole goal is for us to scale in organizations. We want as many people to be healthy, high functioning as we can
Mhm.
because there's a sense of belonging. People want to stay in the organizations, and then we can continue to develop and expand and grow along with the companies.
Are there, just curiosity, are there people that, you had a lot of them that were like in your description? Are there people that are very narrow that are like one or two type thing? Or, if narrow's three, they're three and you've got five or six?
No, everybody is a mix of the five,
Okay. Gotcha.
and it's based on Myers-Briggs. So it is kind of like some data that we've collected from Myers-Briggs, and our company founders created it.
Yeah.
But everybody's five. Sometimes you'll double down on some of the voices that are like the most consistent with who you are. So you'll kind of see some of those tendencies in people.
Uh-huh.
So it just kind of depends on a variety of different factors. But sometimes I'll go in and do workshops to be like, oh my gosh, my wife or my husband is totally the opposite of me, because you can start to see who people are. So that's where it gets really fun. But
Yeah. No, I was just curious because it's like you think, and I guess if you narrowed it down this way, maybe somebody's like 90% one or two things, and then it's like 1% all the rest of them down.
yeah, yeah. The way that Myers-Briggs is made up too. So there's like 8 different factors along it, but there's a spectrum for each. Like introvert, extrovert has a
Yeah.
spectrum. Sensor, intuitive has a spectrum. So there is some fluctuation, but it is designed to be a continuum across all of it. And same with Five Voices.
Becky, I have a question. Are you able to like identify potential new leaders using that information, or the transitioning from doers to leadership with that information? You can say, okay, this person has this trait, this trait, this trait. They potentially could be a good leader in this position. Is that more of a thing that you
Yeah.
see?
Yeah, so we'll do that. So with people coming in, like maybe newly hired, or there's, they're like, hey, this person may have some leadership potential. We really want to groom them in like 6 months to a year. We'll identify those characteristics. And it doesn't mean that certain voices are better as leaders, because that's not the case. It is, how do we optimize the leader? So into the role that they fit into. So it is, okay, this person, naturally is going to be really good at training. It's naturally going to be really good at X, Y, and Z, but they actually have the capacity to lead a team of people. So I want to make sure they're optimized. They understand what stress could look like if they take on a new position. And we're just really helping them grow into the next role. But that's a great question.
Would you also say that there may be a difference in maybe someone's passion to lead a different department than maybe one that is suiting them more based off some of their leadership skills?
Yes, I would say that. Absolutely. Yeah. So I'll give you an example. I'm never going to be an accountant. Don't ever hire me to do your books. Okay. So that would be a mistake. But I would lead people because I love them, and I can inspire, I can motivate. I am good with people just generally, but I'm not going to be somebody's accountant. And I know that. So there are certain fits that make sense. Yes.
Okay.
In that process, can you guys like help people identify, hey, you've got them in this type of role and it just doesn't fit them very well. Like, in order for them to be more successful, you should probably transition them into more, operations or more, you know, uh, they have skills to be good at sales and marketing or something like that. Does that come out of some of this?
It can. It certainly
Yeah.
can. I would say in certain situations where people take on leadership roles, I think that sometimes almost like society expects that to some degree. Like, oh, we have to keep growing, we have to want to lead people. And that's not the role some people want to play.
Mhm.
So it is, they get to that position and they recognize, maybe I'm not the healthiest person here where I was happier doing this. So you can make some adjustments within the organization to get them in a better role. So that can happen. But it's usually based on stress for them too, capacity, if they have the capacity to lead, and they want to lead people versus, doing some different functions within the organization.
Oh, that's neat. Um, Another question for you. What can, we as listeners do to, improve ourselves, beyond just, I know there's programs and things like what you're doing, but just kind of anecdotally to improve, ourselves as leaders, and then how could that then affect, outcomes in healthcare, whether that's a physician or, like what we do, we consult on medical equipment. What would you recommend that, folks try to do to align themselves a little bit better to create better outcomes for people?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think any opportunity to learn or get really curious about yourself is helpful. So, I mean, there's so many different ways to learn: books, there's modules, there's courses, there's a variety of different ways to do it. But I always think when we get curious about ourselves, we get more curious about other people then too. And we're like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, this makes sense why this person might be this way, or something along those lines. But I would just say get really curious and continue learning about yourself in some capacity.
Yeah, that's neat you say that, because we've had several different folks on our podcast talk about, continuous learning and
Mm,
always, trying to advance yourself that way, and that's more of like the internal take. You can learn
mm,
more about how to run a business, or how to, like you were talking about. Yeah, I'm not going to be an accountant, but you could probably learn how to become a better bookkeeper or accountant, but you might not like it. But
yeah.
look internally and take a real deep dive on yourself and get curious, like you said. I like that a lot.
Mm. Yeah, I think as business owners, one of the quotes that I heard that really impacted me is your business will only grow to the effect that you grow. So it only grows to the capacity in which like you can grow as a leader. And a lot of that is internal work, self-reflection, self-awareness, and then, leading other people eventually. But it really is, it requires us to continually evolve because businesses grow or we change. So it really is a continuous process.
Yeah, and I think, Kobe and I were just talking about this while we were out on the road this week too. Like you mentioned about how leadership can change, but as you grow, you're a lot of times in a business, your focus narrows as your business gets larger. So
Yeah.
your skill set might be more oriented towards sales and marketing. Somebody else might be really good operationally. Somebody else might be good at, the finance and accounting. And so you start out really broad because there's one or two people. You're an entrepreneur. And then as you grow, you have to narrow that down. And then your leadership kind of has to narrow down because the people that you hire into those, for lack of a better term, divisions, they are going to be aligned in that kind of thinking, whether it's accounting or operations. And so your leadership then has to evolve to lead those
Yes.
type of people rather than
Yes.
a very broad
Absolutely.
based entrepreneurial CEO
Yes.
type leadership.
Yeah. 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 That's a great example.
Yeah.
One thing that rings a bell would be is the post that you had yesterday of your kids. Is there any traits that you see in kids that potentially make them fall into certain categories um, and just yeah, can you share anything about that?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, my kids are very different. So our assessment, my oldest actually has taken it already. There's like a kid's version of it because I'm like, I need to know who you are. I have some
Yeah.
suspicions.
Mom's like taking you into the lab.
I know. I'm like, making sure I have all my ducks in a row.
Yeah.
Um, so my son is a connector. My oldest is a connector, which he's extroverted. He probably knows more people in my hometown than I do. Like he knows so many people. And we'll be like at the baseball field. He's talking to these adults. I'm like, who are you talking to? And he's like, oh, that's so and so. Like they're, kids are so and so. I'm like, how do you know these people? So he literally knows so many people in our community and like in our area. And then my youngest, I don't he's 10, so he hasn't taken the assessment yet, but he's introverted. He likes people to a certain degree, and then he's like, I'm done with you. I need some space. I need like away from everyone. So we just had a conversation a week ago, like both of my kids, we were on the couch. I'm like, listen. So I'm telling my oldest, I'm like, Joey, do you understand what the difference is between extroverts and introverts? We were having this discussion of like, you can have people around all of the time. Your brother and I, we actually need a little bit of space. And he's like, I had no idea. So it was just the cutest thing of, oh my gosh, there's a little moment of self-awareness of he recognized he needed to give his brother some space when he's in his room and his door is closed. It's a signal to him. He just needs space away. He needs a little time to recharge his battery and then he can come play. But for them, like their relationship can be strained at times because they just are different people. So I'm trying to teach them a little bit about the way the world works and the relationships at this point because I want them to understand like it's okay to be different. And this fundamentally, you're from the same parents, but this is just how you operate that's a little different from the other people. So
That's really interesting. Yeah. I would even say you're kind of developing a leader in him by making him self-aware and teaching him those skills, kind of what you touched on earlier. So that's really interesting.
yeah, I'm trying, Kobe.
Exactly.
I'm trying.
Maybe it'll
Sounds like
be
you're doing a good job.
maybe it'll be your next business partner.
I know. He likes marketing, Kyle, so we'll see. He likes
All right.
to play around with that, so we'll see.
Well, that's good. How old is your oldest?
He's 13.
That's
Yeah,
neat. Wow.
yeah,
That's mine are soon to be 8 and soon to be 4. So probably not ready for any test yet, but they are
yeah.
drastically different.
It's so funny how that happens, right? I'm like, you have the same, you know, people in your life. Like you
Yeah.
have the same parents. How has
Yeah.
this happened? But it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, how we typically like to end these, Becky is talking a little bit about personal. We heard a little bit about your kids, but what's some of the things that you like to do outside of, helping people learn about themselves and develop in leadership? And if that's your hobby too, then awesome.
I love it. I love what I do. I genuinely love getting out of bed every morning because I love what I do. But so I think things that are beyond that, that are passions. I love the outdoors. I love paddleboarding, hiking, bike rides, like anything I get to do with the kids too. I love watching baseball. Like my kids are both in sports, baseball, basketball. So those are
Yeah.
fun things to do too. But yeah,
That's
those
funny
are
you
my
mentioned
go-tos.
paddleboarding. We were just Kobe and I just I don't know, lose track of time when I traveled 2 days ago. I guess it was. We were in St. Simon's Island, Georgia, and that's a paddleboarding mecca. So I've told him, I said that's something I really want to do. So now you're
Yes.
inspiring me.
It's so fun. It is so fun just to be on a lake or wherever. And yeah, it's a blast. So highly encourage you to do that this year.
Yeah,
I can't stand up on the paddleboard. I've tried. I've tried multiple times, and it's
Kobe's a
not
sit
fun for
down
me.
paddleboarder.
I sit down and I
That's okay.
put my legs out in the water, kick my feet.
Yep, that works too. That's just as good.
Yeah, no, that's the um, we're in uh, sports with kids thing, and it's always fun. But again, going back to how competitive I am, I'm just like I get so uptight at my daughter's basketball games. I'm like I need to relax.
Yeah, I hear that. I hear that too.
It's the former athlete in me that hasn't died out just yet.
Yeah, we get to relive it through our kids, Kyle. So
Exactly. Um, yeah. The I any other fun things you're working on or projects you want to share or anything like that?
oh gosh. Um, I think like most of the stuff that I'm doing that's like kind of fun and exciting is in Ohio. So if anybody's in Canton or Columbus, like we're doing some really cool stuff coming up in May, some workshops and stuff that are local. So DM me if that's the case on LinkedIn because we're doing some really cool community stuff here.
Yeah. Anything with the Football Hall of Fame?
Yes, actually, we are. We
Oh,
host something
yes.
there. So
Awesome.
if you're in, yeah, if y'all are in Ohio in May, like the second week of May, come to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. We'll be hosting an event there. So
How cool is that?
yeah,
That's really neat. Well, we've had some projects in Canton. Maybe it'll align, the stars will align, and we'll be there. So,
that'd be awesome. That'd be so cool.
well, tell people also how they can find you and work with you.
Yeah.
'Cause I know, we've done a little bit of stuff with you and excited to do more. But let people know how they can find you and reach out.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn all the time. So DM me through LinkedIn. Just find me with Becky Wolf there. Becky at beckywolf.com. Wolf is with an E if you want to email me. Happy to converse back and forth that way too. So
Awesome. Well, we sure appreciate you carving out the time to talk with us, and it's always a good time again. You know, you're a pro, and we enjoy the times that we get to speak with you, and enjoy the content you put out there too. There's always
yeah.
good stuff to chew on.
Yeah. Well, thank you both. I appreciate it. I love following you both too, seeing where in the world you are. 'Cause it seems like
Yeah,
you're traveling
yeah,
somewhere every week. So I'm like, huh, where y'all at this week?
I know. Where's
Texas
Waldo?
next week.
Texas. I love it. So cool.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. You'll probably see a little something from somewhere in Texas. We'll see
Yeah.
if we can add in a little sightseeing. There's a I don't know if you've ever heard of Pop Stroke. I think Tiger Woods is part owner, but it's like a putt putt, like a Top Golf type thing, but
Oh,
for
cool.
putt putt golf. And like the courses are really really neat. And I think he helped design most of them. And there's one of them right near where we're going to be, so might get a little
Yeah.
bit of Merc competition going on the Pop
I
Stroke
love
It's
greens.
the
I
competitiveness
love
coming
it.
out of him.
Yeah,
I love it. There better be videos or pictures or something.
yeah,
There will be.
yeah. There will.
I love
So,
it.
Well, thanks again, Becky, for your time. We sure appreciate it. And anybody wants to enjoy working with Becky, I'd encourage you reach out to her. So
Yeah. Thank you both. I appreciate the time.
Thank you,
yeah,
Becky.
have a good weekend. We're almost there. Take care.